Yes, but it had also seen love, potential, dreams. Maybe it could see them again. That afternoon, Henry went to his office for the first time in weeks. His assistant nearly dropped her coffee when he walked through the glass doors. "Mr. Cole." We weren't expecting you." "I won't be long," he said, already heading toward the elevator. Inside the executive suite, the walls were as he'd left them. Modern, minimalist, sterile. The view of Manhattan stretched like a painting behind his desk. He sat down, but didn't log into his computer. Instead, he pulled out a photo, the same one Mila had kept by her bedside, and placed it beside a new frame. A candid shot from the park last weekend. Mila mid-laugh, crumbs on her cheek, eyes wide with joy. Eric and Mila, side by side, father and daughter, and now, his family. He looked at the two images and said aloud to the empty room, "I should have opened that door." Gregory entered quietly a moment later. "You're here early." Henry didn't look up. "I came to pack." Gregory blinked. "Pack?" Henry stood, taking only a single folder from his desk. "I'm not coming back. Not the same way, anyway." "You're retiring?" "I'm changing," Henry said. "And the company's going to have to change with me." Gregory studied him. "This about Mila? It's about everything I missed. I don't want to keep missing it." He glanced out the window. "Turns out, building towers doesn't mean much if there's no one in them who calls you home." Gregory didn't argue. That night, Mila was curled up on the couch, watching the Iron Giant with a blanket around her shoulders. Her head rested on Henry's arm. Halfway through the movie, she spoke without turning her head. "Was your son scared?" Henry paused the movie. When he went away. Henry took a slow breath. "I don't think so. He was brave. Like you." She looked up. "Do you think he's with my daddy?" "I like to think they're watching together." She nodded, satisfied. "I hope they're not too mad," she said, "about me using the room." "They're not mad." She closed her eyes. "Okay. I just don't want anyone to think I stole it." Henry wrapped the blanket tighter around her. "No one will ever take anything from you again. Not on my watch." She smiled sleepily. "Promise?" He kissed her hair. "Promise." As she drifted off, the television flickering softly in the background, Henry leaned back and looked at the framed photos on the mantel. Eric, his son, and now Mila. 3 names, 3 lives, woven into one second chance. The conference room on the 48th floor of Cole International was built for intimidation: glass walls, a skyline backdrop, and a table long enough to seat the most powerful men and women in Manhattan real estate. For decades, Henry Cole had ruled this room with a glance, his word final, his reputation carved into polished walnut and reinforced steel. But today, he entered the room not as a titan but as a father. The partners were already seated, murmuring quietly as he approached. Suits pressed, ties straightened, iPads aglow with reports and projections. But every conversation stopped when Henry stepped in. His presence hadn't diminished, even if his priorities had shifted. He took the seat at the head of the table, calmly unbuttoning his blazer. "You're here," said Trevor Wills, a senior partner with salt and pepper hair and a sharp voice that usually preceded criticism. "We weren't sure you still considered yourself active." "I am," Henry said, "but not in the way you think." Trevor leaned forward. "There's concern, Henry. The board hasn't seen a quarterly projection in weeks. You missed the Zurich merger meeting. Investors are nervous." Henry didn't flinch. "Let them be." A pause followed. Then another voice, Mara Chang, VP of Legal, cut in with careful tone. "There's also the matter of your guardianship filings. It's public record now. The media's been slow to pick it up, but if it breaks..." "It already has," Henry said. "I released the statement myself this morning." Whispers flared around the table. Trevor looked stunned. "You, what?" "I told them the truth," Henry continued, "that a young girl entered my life unexpectedly. That she's family. That I am seeking full custody. And that I will no longer tolerate the perception that empathy is a weakness. This company was built on precision, not sentiment." Trevor shot back. "This company," Henry replied evenly, "was built by a man who thought power made him untouchable. That same man missed the chance to meet his son until it was too late. The room fell into an uneasy silence. "Eric," Henry said, his voice lower. "His name was Eric. He was mine. I never claimed him. Not when he knocked on my door at 20. Not when he begged for a meeting 5 years later. And now he's gone. But he left behind a daughter, and I will not fail her." Trevor shifted in his seat. This is a private matter, Henry." "No," Henry said. "It's personal. And that's different. Personal is what you take with you when the office lights shut off. Personal is what you remember when your title doesn't matter anymore." He stood slowly, placing a folder on the table. "In this folder," he continued, "are documents appointing Mara as interim CEO. I'll remain in an advisory role. My priorities have changed, but the company's foundation won't shift. I've ensured continuity. You have nothing to panic about." Mara's eyebrows rose. "Henry, are you sure?" "Never been more." He looked at Trevor, whose face had paled. "And for the record," Henry added, "if this company can't survive the presence of a child in my life, then it was never strong to begin with." When Henry returned home later that afternoon, the first thing he heard was laughter. Not TV laughter. Not the polite, social kind either. Real, unfiltered, child's laughter. It was coming from the guest room, her room now. He walked quietly toward it and peeked through the door. Mila was on the floor with Marjorie, surrounded by building blocks and stuffed animals. She was mid-story, gesturing wildly as the bear rescued the dinosaur from a collapsing tower. And then Daddy Bear said, "Don't be afraid. I'm not going anywhere." Henry froze. Marjorie saw him first and smiled gently. Mila turned, bright-eyed. "Daddy," he smiled, stepping inside. "What's going on in here?" "Emergency," she declared. Mr. Dino was stuck under the blanket cave, but I saved him, and Daddy Bear helped. "Well," he said, crouching, "sounds like I missed some very important heroics." Mila crawled into his lap without hesitation. "Did you have a big meeting today?" Henry nodded. "I did. Did you win?" "I didn't need to." She tilted her head. "Then what happened?" "I made a decision. A big one." She leaned forward. "Was it scary?" "A little." "Right. But you did it." He kissed the top of her head. "Yes. Because of you." She beamed. "Because I'm brave?" He smiled. "Because we're brave." That evening, Henry stood in front of the fireplace, holding a glass of water, no scotch, no wine. He hadn't touched alcohol in weeks. Mila was upstairs, brushing her teeth, singing quietly to herself, off-key and joyful. Gregory stood nearby, reviewing documents. "You sure you want to let Mara run the company?" he asked. "She's earned it," Henry replied. "And I want Mila to know me as something more than a name on a building." Gregory nodded slowly. "You're not afraid they'll forget who built it?" Henry looked up at the mantel, where a new photo now sat Mila, drawing with sidewalk chalk, grinning up at him. "No," he said. "They'll remember. But more importantly, she will." Gregory watched him for a long moment. "Truth is," he said finally, "I never thought I'd see you like this." "Neither did I." Was it Cries and Frentine's Ayers? Henry set the glass down. "But I'm glad I did." From upstairs, Mila called out, "Daddy, you forgot bedtime story." Henry smiled. "No," he said softly, already moving. "I'm right on time." The first storm of November rolled in early that morning, the kind of East Coast gray that hung heavy in the sky like an omen. Rain whispered against the windows of the townhouse, and Mila stood quietly in front of the large living room window, one palm pressed to the glass. "She's out there," she whispered. Henry turned from the kitchen, where he was preparing a late breakfast. "Who is?" "The lady who used to yell at me." Her voice was barely audible. "She doesn't like the cold. Her fingers always turned purple." Henry set the spatula down and crossed to her. "You don't have to think about her anymore," he said gently. Mila didn't move. "But what if she finds me?" Henry crouched down beside her. "She won't." "She might," Mila insisted. "She found me every time. Even when Eric tried to hide me, she always found me." He looked into her eyes, too young to carry so much fear. "You're safe here," he said. "This house has strong locks. And stronger people." Mila frowned. "But you're not always here." "I am now," he said. And even when I'm not right next to you, you're never alone. She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned against him, her small body trembling slightly. He held her, letting the silence do the work. At the precinct, Gregory stood in the corner of a sterile room, watching through the one-way glass. On the other side of the mirror sat Tasha Price. Arms crossed, lips pursed, eyes simmering with defiance. Her lawyer sat beside her, fidgeting nervously with a pen. She's still not talking, Gregory said, into his earpiece. Henry's voice came through. What's she waiting for? A headline, Gregory muttered. Or a price. Henry's silence said everything. The detective on the other side of the mirror leaned in, voice even. We have you on surveillance. Eyewitnesses. Statements from 3 children. There's nowhere to run this time. Tasha rolled her eyes. Yeah? And what do I get if I talk? The detective didn't blink. You get less time, maybe. Tasha leaned forward, sneering. I want a deal, and I want him to know I'm not afraid of him. Gregory stepped away from the glass. She wants to be famous, he said. Henry responded calmly. Then don't give her that. Back at the townhouse, Henry found Mila sitting cross-legged on the rug in her room, building a tower from books, blocks, and stuffed animals. What's that? He asked. A fortress. For what? In case she comes back. Henry sat beside her. You really think this will stop her? No, Mila said honestly, but it makes me feel better. He nodded slowly. Can I help? She handed him a stuffed giraffe. Only if you're good at defense. I've been in boardrooms for 30 years, he smirked. Defense is my specialty. They built together for almost an hour. Mila gave each toy a title. Commander Bunny, General Bear, Sergeant Dino. She was meticulous in placing them. You know, Henry said. Fortresses are strong. But sometimes, the best protection is someone standing in front of you. Like a shield? Exactly. Would you be my shield? He didn't hesitate. Always. She looked at him. Eyes wide. Even if she's yelling? Even if she's stronger? He brushed a curl from her forehead. She can scream all she wants. I've faced worse than screams. And she'll never get to you again. Mila looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, Okay. That night, the wind howled through the streets. Lightning danced along the horizon. Henry sat up reading while Mila slept beside him. Her fingers curled into his sleeve, the photo of Eric under her pillow. At 2:13 a.m., Henry's phone buzzed. Gregory. He stepped out into the hallway to answer. She's flipped, Gregory said. Started talking 10 minutes ago. Henry rubbed his eyes. What changed? She saw your press release. The part where you said Mila was your daughter now. I think it rattled her. She realized she doesn't scare anyone anymore. What did she say? Enough to open an old file, Gregory said. Turns out, Eric wasn't the only one she worked. There were other kids, other payments, possibly a ring. We're digging, and we may need your help to open a few doors. Henry didn't hesitate. Send me everything. And Henry? Yes? You might want to be careful. She still talks like someone who's lost control and might try to get it back. Henry's voice was steel. Let her try. The next morning, Mila woke to the smell of cinnamon and butter. She padded downstairs in fuzzy socks, rubbing her eyes. Henry was in the kitchen, flipping French toast. A plate already waited for her, dusted with powdered sugar and shaped like a bear's face. Marjorie had even made cocoa, marshmallows bobbing like tiny clouds. Mila sat at the table, still half asleep, and whispered, Thanks, Daddy. He looked over his shoulder. Always. She took a bite and sighed contentedly, but before she could swallow, her small voice broke through the peace. Daddy? Yes. If she came back, and she tried to take me. Henry turned to her fully now. I won't let her. But if she lies? I'll tell the truth louder, but if she hurts me, she won't. His voice was steady, absolute. You're not a secret anymore, Mila. You're not lost. You're mine. She stared at him, marshmallow stuck to her lip, and whispered, Okay. She believed him, because in that moment, she realized something more powerful than her fear. Storms had names too, but so did shields. The headlines came that Thursday morning. sweeping across every news feed and television screen in New York like a controlled fire. But this time, Henry had lit the match himself. Billionaire Henry Cole seeks full custody of daughter of deceased street musician. From towers to toy boxes, the new life of real estate tycoon Henry Cole. Family or facade? The story behind Cole's sudden transformation. The media didn't know what to make of it. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others whispered about guilt, a fall from power, or a late life breakdown. But none of them had sat across from Mila at breakfast, watching her cut her pancakes into tiny stars so no bite would be left behind. None of them had heard her call him daddy like she'd always meant to. Henry had expected judgment. What he hadn't expected was silence. At least, not from his enemies. It was his friends who fell quiet. At the Barclay Club, where Henry had been a member for nearly 2 decades, he found himself alone at the table he used to share with 4 other men. Founders, tycoons, men whose opinions shaped skyscrapers and elections. Henry, one of them had said earlier that week, swirling a glass of brandy, "You've always been calculated. But this is messy." "Children are messy," Henry replied, "but so is healing." Another leaned in. "Look, we all have regrets, but you've taken in someone else's mistake and made it yours." Henry looked at them for a long time. Then he stood. "She's not a mistake," he said. "She's the first thing I've ever gotten right." He never returned to the club after that. Meanwhile, across the city, in the classrooms and cafes and crowded sidewalks, something else was happening. People read the headlines and didn't roll their eyes. They paused, because it wasn't just about a billionaire adopting a poor black girl. It was about a man admitting he had failed and choosing to change. It was about a child who had survived hell, and now had a bedroom with painted stars on the ceiling and a window that didn't need bars. It was about justice not in a courtroom, but in the quiet moments of choice. At school, Mila noticed it too. Her classmates, many of them used to whispering about her clothes, her skin, her silence, now asked to sit beside her. Some asked questions, curious but kind. One girl even handed her a drawing of 2 stick figures and a rainbow, labeled Mila and her new dad. Mrs. Holloway called Henry that afternoon. "She smiled today," she said. "A real one." Henry smiled back, even though she couldn't see it. "She's starting to believe the good stuff stays." That evening, Henry sat with Mila on the living room floor. They were piecing together a 1,000-piece puzzle, a snow-covered lighthouse against a navy sky. Mila liked puzzles. She said they made her feel like the world could fit together if you were patient enough. "I saw my name today," she said suddenly. "In the newspaper?" She nodded. "A girl showed me at recess." Henry stiffened slightly. "And what did you think?" Mila picked up a puzzle piece and twirled it between her fingers. It was weird, like my story wasn't mine anymore. Henry reached over and took the piece from her, placing it perfectly into a corner. "I know the feeling. I was seat. Did they lie?" "No," he said. "But they didn't tell the whole truth either." "What's the whole truth?" "That you're not a headline. You're a heartbeat." She looked at him, unsure. He smiled. "That means you're the center of something real, something alive. Not a thing to talk about, but a person to love." Mila tilted her head. "Does that mean they don't get to decide who I am?" "Exactly." She nodded. "Good." She won president. They returned to the puzzle in silence, the lighthouse beginning to take shape between their hands. Later that night, after Mila had gone to bed, Henry sat on the rooftop terrace. The city glittered below, oblivious and infinite. For years, this view had made him feel powerful. Tonight, it made him feel small, but in a good way. Gregory joined him, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. "You've made some waves," he said. "I know. You're not exactly making it easy on the PR team." Henry took a sip. "I'm not here to be easy. I'm here to be right." Gregory chuckled. "I got a call from a judge today. Said your guardianship hearing's been moved up. Apparently someone high up put in a word." Henry arched a brow. "Friend of yours?" Gregory shrugged. "Friend of someone Mila helped at school." "Word spreads, Henry. So does truth." They sat in silence a moment longer. Then Gregory added, "You sure you're ready for the next chapter?" "I'm not sure of anything," Henry admitted. "But she is." And sometimes, that was enough. The courthouse stood like a monument to everything Henry had once believed in: structure, order, power. And yet, as he stepped through the heavy doors with Mila's tiny hand in his, it didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a proving ground. Marion Hayes met them at the security checkpoint, a leather-bound portfolio clutched in one hand, her other holding a scarf tight against the November wind. She smiled at Mila first. "You ready, little one?" Mila looked up, eyes wide but brave. "Will they ask if I want to stay?" "They might," Marion said gently, "and it's okay to say how you feel." Mila nodded, her hand tightening around Henry's. Inside, the family court was quieter than the other chambers, less dramatic than TV would suggest. Still, the weight of what happened inside these walls could rewrite entire lives. They were led to a small waiting room, pastel-colored chairs, tissue boxes on every table. Mila whispered, "Is this where people get in trouble?" "No," Henry said softly. "This is where people get second chances." Their case was scheduled for 10:45 a.m. sharp. Judge Margaret Fulton, age 67, was known for being fair but not forgiving. Her record was clean, her stare cutting. She had seen too many broken families to be easily impressed. She scanned the documents before her as Henry and Marion approached the table. "And where is the child now?" she asked. Marion nodded toward the second row. "She's seated with Miss Marjorie Green, Your Honor." Judge Fulton peered over her glasses. Her eyes softened slightly when she saw Mila sitting quietly, back straight, hands folded over the bear in her lap. "You're Mila?" the judge asked. Mila stood up nervously. "Yes, ma'am. Do you know why you're here today?" Mila glanced at Henry, then back at the judge. "To see if I can stay with my daddy." "Do you want to stay with him?" Mila's chin lifted. "I need to." There was a silence that spread through the courtroom like spilled ink. Judge Fulton leaned back, lips tight, but her gaze lingered on the girl. "I've read the reports," she said. "Unorthodox beginnings. Questionable legal trail. A tragic history." Henry didn't flinch. "But also," she continued, "a stable environment now. A consistent caregiver. Emotional growth in the child, and surprisingly, a willingness from the petitioner to fully commit to long-term custody and emotional support." "I don't do things halfway, Your Honor," Henry said calmly. Judge Fulton looked at him. "No, Mr. Cole, you don't." There was a pause. "Do you understand what it means?" she asked. "To be her legal parent not just in name, but in every way? Through scraped knees, nightmares, first heartbreaks, and college applications?" Henry's voice was steady. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you understand that this child is not an accessory, not a project, not an atonement?" "I do." The judge leaned forward. "Then I'll ask you what I rarely ask in this courtroom, Mr. Cole. Why?" Henry looked at Mila, then back at the judge. "Because I was given a second chance," he said. "By a little girl who didn't even know what that meant. Because she trusted me before I'd earned it. Because love doesn't come when you deserve it. It comes when you show up for it." He paused. "And because if I fail her, then I fail everything that ever mattered." The courtroom was still. Even the stenographer blinked back a tear. Judge Fulton looked down at her papers, then signed her name with a slow, deliberate stroke. "I hereby grant full and permanent custody of Mila Rose Carter to Mr. Henry James Cole." Mila gasped. Henry smiled. He didn't pump a fist. He didn't sigh with relief. He simply stood, walked over to the row, and knelt in front of the girl who had taught him what family meant. "It's official," he said. "Does that mean I'm really yours now?" she whispered. "You always were." She jumped into his arms. Behind them, the judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole," he turned. "One last thing." "Yes, Your Honor?" She smiled, just a hint. "Don't screw it up." Outside the courthouse, the wind had softened. Mila walked beside Henry, swinging his hand back and forth. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "It's November." "Hot chocolate then?" He grinned. "Deal." As they approached the car, a woman called out from across the street. "Mr. Cole." Henry turned. It was a journalist, young, out of breath, a press badge swinging from her neck. "Do you have a comment about today's ruling?" Henry looked down at Mila, then back at the reporter. "Yes," he said. "Tell them this." She raised her recorder. Tell them justice isn't just what happens in court. Sometimes, it's what happens in a child's heart when she finally hears the word home and believes it. The reporter blinked. Henry opened the door for Mila, helped her in, and climbed in after her. As the car pulled away, Mila whispered, "Daddy?" "Yes. Do we have to tell everybody?" "No," he said. "Just the people who matter." She leaned against him. "Well, I think you matter." Henry smiled. "That's the best headline I've ever heard." It had been 2 weeks since the courtroom, but Henry noticed something he hadn't before, not just the change in Mila, but in himself. He laughed more now. He didn't bark orders at waiters or snap at late phone calls. His staff noticed, too. Marjorie started calling him Henry instead of Mr. Cole when they were alone, an unspoken sign that he was finally joining the rest of the human race. But not everyone welcomed the change. At the office, Trevor Wills had requested a meeting. In person. "I'll be home by 4, Henry told Mila that morning as he helped button her coat. She squinted at him. "Promise?" He crouched to her level. "Pinky, swear." "Ubret." She hooked her pinky around his, and just before heading to school, she turned and said, "You don't have to smile all the time, Daddy, but I like it when you do." He smiled then, just for her, and then he left. Trevor waited in Henry's former office, now Mara's, though the plaque hadn't been changed yet. He sat like he always had. Too stiff. Too polished. Like a man clinging to a ship already taking on water. "You're here," Henry said, stepping inside. "Clearly. Henry took a seat across from him, noting the way Trevor didn't offer a handshake. "So," Henry said, "how's the company holding up without me? Profits are stable. Your transition plan is working. And yet," Henry added, "you're here." Trevor didn't waste time. "People are talking, Henry. Shareholders, clients. Your name's being associated with social work and charity foundations. Not real estate. Not leadership." Henry smiled faintly. "And what exactly are you afraid of, Trevor? That I'll make decency look good?" Trevor leaned in. "No. That you'll make it look trendy. Like it's a phase. And when it ends, the fallout will bury us all." Henry's jaw tightened. "This isn't a phase," he said. "This is the rest of my life. You're throwing away legacy." Henry stood. "No. I'm redefining it." Trevor scoffed. "You used to be feared." Henry looked out the window, toward the horizon where the city met the sky. "I used to be lonely, Trevor. There's a difference." He turned back to him. "Legacy isn't about your name being on buildings. It's about whether anyone whispers it at bedtime." Trevor blinked. "I don't expect you to understand," Henry added, "but I do expect you to get out of the way." That afternoon, Henry arrived at Mila's school 5 minutes early. He stood near the playground fence, watching her play with 2 girls from her class. They took turns jumping rope while another counted. Mila was laughing. Not the careful kind, the loud, unguarded kind. Mrs. Holloway approached him quietly. "She's different now," she said. "Freer." "She's home now," Henry replied. Mrs. Holloway smiled. "And you? Are you different?" He thought about it. "Yes," he said. "I used to check my watch when people talked too long. Now, I forget I'm wearing one." She chuckled. "That's progress." The bell rang. Kids scattered. Mila ran to him. "Daddy!" she cried. "You're early." E2. "Told you I would be. Can we go to the bookstore today? I want to find the next story about the dragon who gets adopted." He laughed. "Is that a series now?" "Everything's a series if you want it to be," she said seriously. He opened the car door for her. "Then let's go find your dragon." Later that evening, they stopped by Eric's old block. Mila asked to see it again, not to cry, just to look. The building was quieter now, cleaner. One of the neighbors had started a mural on the side, a phoenix, wings wide, painted by local teens. "That's new," Henry said. Mila stood still, studying it. "That's what he was, huh?" "Who?" "My dad, Eric. He burned and came back, even if just for me." Henry looked at her. "You're part of that too." She stepped closer to the wall. A small white corner near the bottom had been left blank. She turned to him. "Can I write something?" Henry looked around, then back at her. "What do you want it to say?" She thought for a long time. Finally, she whispered, Tell them he mattered. Henry reached into his coat, pulled out a pen, and handed it to her. Her handwriting was shaky, but the message was clear. He mattered. She signed it with a simple heart. That night, Mila fell asleep early, curled beside the bear Henry had repaired 3 times now. The house was quiet. Henry stepped into his study, poured a glass of water, and looked at the framed photo of Eric, the one where he held baby Mila with a pride that refused to fade, even in death. "You did good, kid," Henry whispered. "And I'm trying." The man who had once forgotten how to smile was now raising a girl who reminded him every day that love wasn't a threat, it was the reason. It started like any ordinary Saturday. Mila sat at the breakfast table in her oversized hoodie, slathering peanut butter onto pancakes with a precision Henry found both alarming and impressive. Marjorie hummed from the kitchen, flipping bacon and sipping coffee between turns. Henry sipped his own cup, the newspaper folded neatly beside him, unread. "Can we go to the planetarium today?" Mila asked, eyes hopeful. Henry glanced at the calendar. "Weren't we going to paint birdhouses?" "Birds don't float in space, Daddy." "To that," he chuckled. "I stand corrected." Just as Mila poured syrup with dramatic flair, the doorbell rang. Henry checked his watch. 9:07 a.m. Odd. He opened the front door to find Gregory standing there. Not in his usual suit, but a gray jacket, wind-blown hair, and a manila folder tucked under his arm. "This early?" Henry asked, stepping aside. Gregory's face told him everything. This wasn't a social visit. "Sorry," Gregory said quietly. "But we found something." Henry stiffened. "Involving Tasha?" Gregory nodded. "And Eric." They sat in the study while Mila painted constellations on a cardboard box spaceship in the living room. "The door stayed cracked open," Henry insisted. Gregory laid the folder on the desk. "It turns out," he began, "Eric wasn't just protecting Mila from Tasha. He was trying to get her out of something much worse." Henry opened the folder. Photos, notes, a list of names. Gregory continued, voice low. "There's evidence that Tasha was connected to a network of people who placed vulnerable children for private caretaking off-the-record arrangements. Cash only. No oversight. Mila was on that list." Henry's jaw clenched. "They were shopping her around like property." Gregory said. "Eric found out. That's why he disappeared for a time. He was hiding her." Henry looked at one document, a payment record with Mila's initials, and a transaction dated just a week before Eric's death. "I don't believe in coincidences anymore," Henry said. Gregory shook his head. "Neither do I." Henry closed the folder, fists tight. "And now," he asked, "what happens to the others?" "We're building a case," Gregory said. "It could take time, years even, but you've given us something real to start with." Henry stood and paced toward the window, anger simmering in his chest. "All those kids." Gregory didn't respond. He didn't need to. Henry turned. "They'll come after her, won't they? Maybe not directly, but if any of them catch wind that you're digging, they'll want to discredit you, or scare you off." Henry's voice was cold steel. "Let them try." Later that afternoon, Henry found Mila on the rooftop terrace, lying inside her cardboard spaceship, with her bear strapped in beside her. "Commander Carter," he said, saluting. "Do you copy?" She looked up and giggled. "Mission status, safe. All systems go. Is 2 that at 9. May I enter the vessel? Only if you bring snacks." He held up a bag of apple slices and a juice box. "Permission granted," she declared. He sat beside her, careful not to crush any of the painted stars. They looked up at the real sky, faint behind the city haze. "Do you think people get scared when they go to space?" she asked suddenly. "I'm sure they do," he said. "Why?" "Because even when you leave the world behind," he answered, "you still carry everything that matters with you." "Mine." She thought for a second. "That's heavy." "It is," he smiled, "but it also keeps you grounded." "Even in space?" "Even in space." They lay in silence for a moment. Then Mila whispered, "Were there other girls like me?" Henry didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said finally. "There were." She turned to him. "Will you help them too?" He met her eyes. "I will." She nodded once, solemn. Good. Because nobody else did. It's C. That night, after Mila had gone to bed, Henry stood alone in Eric's old room, the one Mila now called hers. He looked around at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the book she had left open on her pillow, the drawing of her and Henry taped to the closet door. He thought of the other children, the other names in the file, the silence they lived in, the fear, the neglect, and he realized something. He had found his purpose, not just to be her father, but to be their voice. For every child who had been tossed aside and told they were unworthy, for every Eric who had died protecting someone else's hope, he would speak, and when necessary, he would roar. It was a Thursday when the phone call came. Not the kind of day that announces itself with warning signs or ominous clouds, just a regular day with grocery lists and school pickup and the usual dance of ordinary things. Marjorie answered the house line, a habit she'd never broken, and called for Henry with a voice that trembled more than usual. "There's someone on the line," she said softly. "Says he knows something about Eric. About the night he died." Henry took the phone with quiet caution. "This is Henry Cole." The voice on the other end was raspy, uncertain. "I wasn't gonna say anything," the man began. "But I saw the girl. In the papers. And I knew I couldn't hold it anymore." "Who is this?" "Name's Lenny. I worked janitorial at the Granger building. Night shift. 2 years ago, I was cleaning the back alley around 3 a.m. That's when I saw it. Saw him." Now, Henry's grip on the phone tightened. "Saw who?" "Your son," Lenny said. "Eric. He was bleeding, trying to carry the little girl. Said someone was coming. Told me to run. I didn't help. I ran like a coward." Henry's voice dropped low. "Do you know who was after him?" "I didn't then. But now I think I do. I saw the face of the woman who showed up a minute later. Same one from the papers now. The social worker. Tasha." Silence fell between them. "I should have done something," Lenny whispered. "You just did," Henry said. An hour later, Henry sat across from Gregory in his apartment, the city humming below them. "This changes the timeline," Gregory said, flipping through notes. "If Tasha was there that night, and Eric was trying to get Mila out, this could elevate the charges. We're not just chasing proof anymore," Henry said. "We're chasing a pattern." Gregory nodded. "And patterns leave trails." Henry stared out the window, his voice hardening. "Then we follow every damn one of them." And again. At school, Mila was quieter than usual. Mrs. Holloway noticed the difference, her posture more slouched, her laugh more restrained. After art class, she gently pulled Mila aside. "Everything okay?" Mila shrugged. Mrs. Holloway knelt. "You can tell me anything." Mila fiddled with the hem of her shirt. "Sometimes I think if I smile too much, something bad will happen. Like I'm not supposed to be this happy." Mrs. Holloway's heart ached. "You know what I think?" she said. "I think joy is brave. And you, Mila, are one of the bravest girls I know." Mila looked up. "Even when I'm scared?" "Especially when you're scared." Mila nodded, slowly, and then she smiled. That evening, Henry sat Mila down after dinner. "There's something we need to talk about," he said gently. She looked up, already sensing the weight. "A man called today. He saw your father the night he—" Henry paused. "The night he saved you." Mila's eyes welled. "He did save me. 18. I know he did," Henry said. "And we're going to honor that. We're helping the police find the people who hurt him and you. Will they get in trouble? If we do our job right." Mila was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "Does that mean we're going to tell my story too?" Henry nodded. "Only if you're ready." She swallowed. "What if it makes people mad?" He leaned in, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Then let them be mad, but don't ever be silent." And 2 weeks later, Mila sat beside Henry on a community center stage, in front of an audience of parents, teachers, officers, and survivors. The event was small, meant to raise awareness about reforming child protective oversight, but for Mila, it felt like standing in the middle of a storm. The host handed her the mic. Her hands trembled, but she stood. "My name is Mila Carter," she began, voice small but steady. "And I used to be invisible." She told them about hiding under beds, about skipping meals so Eric could eat, about pretending to sleep when yelling started. She didn't cry not because she wasn't hurting, but because she was healing. And at the end, she said, "I'm not a secret anymore. And neither are the others." The room stood. Some wept. Henry didn't applaud. He just stood up and walked to her, pulled her into his arms. "Did I do good?" she asked against his shoulder. "You changed everything," he whispered. Back home, after the lights and the questions and the hugs from strangers, Mila sat on her bed, holding her bear close. "Daddy? Yes? Do you think Eric saw?" Henry didn't answer right away. He sat on the edge of her bed, looked at the stars on the ceiling, the ones she'd made him promise never to repaint. "I think he never stopped watching." Mila nodded. "Okay. Then I hope he knows. I'm okay now." Henry smiled. "He knows, Mila. He knows." Outside, the city lights pulsed, not with noise, but with presence, and in the quiet that followed, Henry felt something rise in his chest, a roar not made of sound, but of purpose. Justice wasn't a destination, it was a path, and they were walking it together. It started with a letter, delivered by courier, hand-addressed, sealed with a crest Henry hadn't seen in years, an invitation to the annual Cole Foundation Gala. A legacy event, one Henry had hosted for decades before stepping down. But this letter wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to Miss Mila Rose Carter. Marjorie found him staring at it that morning, coffee growing cold in his hand. "Well?" she asked. Henry blinked. "They invited her. Not me." Marjorie leaned in, her voice kind. "Because she is you now." He nodded slowly, the truth settling in. "She is." At school, Mila found the envelope in her backpack, tucked beside her lunchbox. Her eyes widened. "Is it bad?" she asked Henry when he picked her up. "No," he smiled. "It's important." She looked down at the embossed card again. "Do I have to give a speech?" "Not unless you want to." She considered that. "Then maybe just a sentence." Henry chuckled. "That's often more than enough." The day of the gala arrived crisp and gold, like autumn had paused to watch. Mila wore a pale blue dress Marjorie had tailored from one of Henry's old ties and silk scraps. It shimmered slightly under the lights, not from glamour, but from memory. "You look like yourself," Henry said when she stepped out. She frowned. "Isn't that bad?" He knelt, fixing her collar gently. "It's everything." At the venue, an old museum converted for charity events, the air buzzed with polished voices and practiced charm. Henry guided her gently through the crowd, introducing her to people who suddenly forgot their rehearsed lines and hollow compliments. Because when Mila looked up and said, "Hi, I'm Mila," something disarmed them, something real. Near the back of the ballroom stood Miss Abigail Kerr, chair of the Cole Foundation, a woman Henry had once tried to buy out of a deal and who had never quite forgiven him for failing. She approached, heels clicking against the marble floor, eyes sharp. "So," she said, glancing between them. "This is the girl." Mila curtsied awkwardly. "Yes, ma'am." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "You know why you're here?" Mila nodded. "Because people forgot about kids like me." Abigail blinked. "And?" she prompted. Mila tilted her head. "And I think they shouldn't anymore." Abigail turned to Henry. "She's better at this than you were." "I know," he said proudly. "I wasn't complimenting you." "I still know." Abigail turned back to Mila, softening. "Would you like to speak tonight? Just a few words?" Mila hesitated. Then, "Yes, but only one sentence." Abigail smiled. "Sometimes. That's all we need." When the lights dimmed and the podium glowed, Mila walked to the stage alone. No one guided her. No one followed. She stood behind a microphone nearly taller than her and adjusted it with effort. People in gowns and suits looked at her, puzzled at first, then hushed. Mila looked out across the room. "My name is Mila Rose Carter," she said. "And I am not invisible." She stepped back. Silence, then applause. Not polite clapping, but rising. People stood not for drama, but for truth. Not for a speech, but for a name. And somewhere, among the sea of suits and sequins, Henry wiped a tear he didn't think he'd ever shed in public. Afterward, reporters tried to approach. Donors, too. But Mila clung to Henry's hand and simply said, No questions tonight. He grinned. My little publicist. She looked up at him. Did I do okay? You did perfect. They walked out into the night. Autumn leaves circled their feet, catching in her curls. Did Eric ever go to fancy parties like that? She asked. Henry shook his head. No. But he played music outside them. And I bet he wondered what it was like inside. She smiled. Then maybe he heard me. I'm sure he did. She paused, holding his hand tighter. I think he'd like my name. Henry looked down at her. He'd love your name, because it's yours now, and you made it mean something. Back home, Mila changed into pajamas and climbed into bed, but before she pulled the blanket up, she reached under her pillow and pulled out a drawing, her and Eric standing on a rooftop, stars behind them, Henry in the middle. Can we hang it? She asked. Where? Over the door. Why? She smiled sleepily. So every time I leave, I remember who came before. Henry nodded, and as he tacked the picture to the wall, he realized something. Legacy wasn't just what people left behind, it was what children carried forward. Snow had begun to fall by the time the first call came in. Henry stood in the kitchen, stirring hot cocoa while Mila added exactly 13 marshmallows to hers, for luck, she said. Marjorie was humming along to Bing Crosby on the radio when the landline rang. She picked it up with the practiced grace of someone who had answered thousands of calls over a lifetime. But this time, her voice caught. Henry, she said, holding the receiver to him. It's the mayor's office. 2 days and 3 days. He raised an eyebrow. What on earth for? She just smiled. You'd better take it. An hour later, Henry sat in his study. Phone call finished. Cup gone cold. Heart unsteady. The mayor wanted him to speak. Not at a gala, not at a fundraiser, but at the city's annual Day of Honor, dedicated to New York's unsung heroes. For the first time in years, they were naming a public award after a civilian, the Eric Carter Courage Award. I didn't expect that, Henry told Gregory, who had come over immediately upon hearing the news. Gregory leaned back. You earned it. No, Henry said quietly. He did. That Friday, the award ceremony took place on the steps of the old city library, Eric's favorite spot. The weather had turned gray, with snow dusting the edges of the granite steps. A modest crowd had gathered: community workers, foster advocates, students, and more than a few former street musicians holding worn guitars. Mila held Henry's hand tightly, her other clutching a framed picture of Eric. The mayor gave a short speech, then handed the microphone to Henry. He walked slowly up the steps, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to remember. Every single one, every step Eric had taken carrying Mila, hiding her, loving her when the world didn't. He looked out across the crowd and spoke. Eric Carter was a father, a protector, a musician, and the kind of man I hope to become even now. He held up the framed photo. He died doing what most of us are too afraid to live for someone else. He took a breath, voice cracking just slightly. This award bears his name, but its meaning belongs to everyone who has ever stood up when they could have stepped aside. He looked down at Mila, and to every child who's ever waited for someone to open the door. After the ceremony, Henry and Mila stood by the library wall, where the city had installed a permanent plaque with Eric's name. Below it read, "Courage is not loud. It's the quiet hand that reaches back for someone else." Mila traced the letters with her mittened fingers. Does this mean he's famous now? Henry smiled. I think it means he's remembered. She nodded. That's better. Weeks passed. Winter settled in fully, but inside the brownstone, warmth bloomed. Mila began piano lessons. Henry signed the paperwork to convert the Cole Foundation into a new initiative focused solely on children's advocacy. And on Saturday mornings, they volunteered together, Mila helping serve soup at shelters, Henry reading books to restless kids whose lives echoed hers. But one moment changed everything. It was a knock. At the door, Marjorie answered, then called softly, "Mr. Cole?" He stepped into the foyer. There, just beyond the threshold, stood a woman with tired eyes and a small boy clinging to her coat. Her name was Sarah. She had seen the news, read the stories, heard about Mila. He's been in the system a year, she whispered. I don't know where else to go. Henry looked at the boy about 6, silent, eyes dark and searching. Then he looked at Mila, who had walked up beside him, holding her bear. She reached out to the boy, smiling gently. "I used to be scared too," she said. "But this house is nice." Henry looked down at her, then back at the woman. "You're not too late," he said. "Come in." The woman stepped forward. The boy followed, and the door, like Henry's heart, stayed open. That night, as Mila fell asleep with her bear in one arm and a storybook in the other, Henry sat in the doorway of her room, watching the rise and fall of her breath. He thought of all the doors he had once closed, and all the ones still left to open. Legacy, he had learned, wasn't what you left behind. It was who you let in. And love? Love didn't knock. It moved in. This story reminds us that family isn't defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and the courage to show up when it matters most. It teaches us that healing begins when someone chooses to see the invisible, to listen to the silenced, and to protect the vulnerable not for praise, but because it's right. In a world where power often speaks the loudest, this story whispers a quiet truth. Compassion changes everything.